Welcome to Follow South Jersey's Follow Salem podcast, all about the people, places, and all things good in Salem, New Jersey. Today we're talking with Tom Smith, Board President of Stand Up for Salem. Stand Up for Salem has been serving Salem since 1988, working to transform the city's neighborhoods by fostering resident-based planning and volunteer-driven projects. Hi, my name is Dean Johnson. I'm editor-in-chief of Follow South Jersey, and welcome to our inaugural podcast of Follow Salem about the people, places, and things to do here in Salem, New Jersey. Today, we are with Tom Smith. Tom's a territory sales manager of Mannington Mills in Salem, and he's also the board president for Stand Up for Salem. Tom, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate that. So tell us, what is your connection to Salem?
So my connection to Salem, I grew up in Woodstown, which is basically one town over.
Right.
But my mom and a lot of my other family members grew up in Salem.
Right.
My family owns Mannington Mills, which is the flooring manufacturer that's situated just outside of town here. It's technically in Mannington Township, but we say Salem just to make it a little easier. So yeah, I've been coming to Salem my entire life. That's my.
So how is your connection to Stand Up for Salem?
My father and grandfather actually started Stand Up for Salem in like 1987, 1988. I tried to do a little research on this before I came in here today.
Okay.
So I think the first meeting was technically in 1988.
Okay.
And actually one of the pictures I have in my office at home is me shaking my dad's hand at one of the first Stand Up for Salem annual dinners. So I've been near the organization for my entire life, basically.
Right. Why did they start? Give some kind of background history about Stand Up for Salem.
I think that the impetus for the foundation of Stand Up for Salem, my grandfather, John Campbell, and Charles Peterson, who was a local scientist, they basically wanted to help revitalize the town of Salem. So like a lot of other towns in America in the 1980s, you started to see jobs in manufacturing and people leaving Salem. So there used to be a bottling factory and a Heinz factory here. Those were sold and then closed down. And the idea was to kind of start an organization of people in town and businesses to help rekindle some revitalization, get the community a little more involved in the betterment of the town.
Right. And how long have you been involved with it? Have you always been involved with it since it was a family?
I've been near it and doing Stand Up for Salem events like since I was, I guess, 6 or 7 years old.
Right.
I've been actively involved in the board for about 8 years. Mm-hmm. So at Mannington, we started a Mannington Family Council, which is basically a sort of a way to interact between the company and the shareholders. And I was on this family council and got involved in the philanthropy committee. Mm-hmm. And through that, I started getting more and more involved in Stand Up for Salem. And if you show up to Tony meetings at Stand Up for Salem, you eventually become part of the board or on a committee, and sort of just kind of came on board that way.
So in your tenure, the 8-year tenure so far on the board, what have you seen growth, or what kind of projects have you seen done for Stand Up for Salem?
So we've done a number of projects since I've been on board. Our biggest project we've undertaken is the revitalization of the J.C. Penney building, which is located right next to where we are here today. We're on Broadway. Mm-hmm. That J.C. Penney building was the first J.C. Penney in the state of New Jersey, mm-hmm. and it was kind of the place everyone talks about when they think about coming into Salem. Kids would go there and get their school clothes, they get Christmas presents. They have very fond memories of that. Unfortunately, like we were talking about, and it was one of the businesses that closed down in the late 1980s. Mm-hmm. The building was sort of in disrepair. Stand Up for Salem was able to acquire that property, and the vision, and actually this was really the mayor's vision, Jody Veller, mm-hmm. She was an employee of Stand Up for Salem at the time, was to turn that into a restoration arts training center.
All right, explain what that means.
So Salem is a historic town. We're actually going to be celebrating our 350th anniversary next year.
Right.
There's a number of historic properties, both commercial and residential, in Salem and in the surrounding area. I mean, it's part of the charm of the town, but there's not necessarily the tradesmen or people that are trained in the skills to revitalize some of these properties.
Like what kind of trades?
So we did a little bit of a study beforehand, and we looked at the trades that were most underrepresented in terms of training, historical trades most underrepresented in this area. The two that we identified were woodworking and plaster.
Okay.
So these kind of like finer molds and things you can put into the crown moldings inside the buildings, and then just basic woodworking inside the home.
So you had some molds donated. Some were kind of famous.
Yes.
Can you talk about them?
We were lucky enough, David Flaherty, who is a master plasterer, I've gotten better at saying that over the years, he has done a number of projects in historic properties around the United States. So he's done things in the White House, the Smithsonian, Independence Hall. Those are a few of the bigger ones. He was retiring, and he wanted to basically, hand these off to someone or an organization that could use them. And we got linked up through him, through the architect that we used for the JCPenney restoration project.
Mm-hmm.
And we've now transferred those molds down here. One kind of cool mold, actually, there's like members of the Bush family. He took molds of their feet when George Bush, the first George Bush, was in office. I guess they put those molds into the garden or something like
Right.
that. So we've got some pretty cool.
So we have feet.
We have feet.
molds.
Yes, we have feet, and we have White House and a bunch of other things over there. But yeah, I must confess, I'm actually hoping to start taking some woodworking classes over there. I'm by no means a craftsman, but
Right.
from what we've been told and talking to other people, I mean, these are very valuable assets to have in terms of being able to keep the history.
Right. So what are some other projects? If we talk about the JCPenney building.
Other projects we've been doing, we have a community outreach program through St. John's Pentecostal Church. So Sunita Johnson, which I'm sure you'll have her in this podcast at some point in time. She's great and has a lot of energy. But through NRTC, and I guess I'll touch on that in a second, we've funded her community outreach. And she's basically working with both kids, seniors, various people in town to supply positive things to do, identify issues, do community organizing. So it ranges from they do splash days for kids in the summer to senior events for bingo to addressing food scarcity. So it's kind of a far-reaching program that she does, just identifying needs of people and trying to supply positive things for people to do.
Right. So you mentioned funding.
Yes.
Where does the money come from for all this?
So our main source of funding at Center for Salem has traditionally been NRTC, which is Neighborhood Revitalization Tax Credits. And the easy way to explain that is businesses can essentially, they have a tax liability. They can give that tax liability to Trenton in a formal way, or they can fund these tax credits, which go to to nonprofits. So Stand Up for Salem, we have to put in an application to be an acceptable project that can be funded by these tax credits. We've been lucky enough to have been accepted every time we've applied. And then these businesses, instead of giving the money to the state for their tax liability, earmark it to go towards our organization.
Okay.
And the main funders of that have been PSE&G has been a big supporter, TD Bank, Ocean First, Fulton Bank, just to name a few of the funders.
What's the number of investment do you see during in a given year?
That ranges, like we've gotten up to $700,000 in an NRTC allocation, which is the largest one that we've received, and sometimes as low as around 300. So that's generally our main source of funding.
Right.
And then you have subsets of projects that are identified in those applications. Our other sources of funding, Mannington has traditionally been a big funder of the organization, and that actually comes in the way of both just a straight contribution, but Mannington provides the office space that Stand Up for Salem is in.
Right.
They provide some assistance in terms of when there's HR, legal, whatever the case might be, and then also they help out with other additional donations for annual dinner, things
Right.
like that.
Right. So what do you see as some of the major issues facing Salem? What are some of the challenges facing Salem today?
Well, unfortunately, I had this article texted to me several times last night. Salem has been identified as the 5th most dangerous small town in America, which it's a little frustrating that that's the kind of thing that gets shared so rapidly when there are other positive things that are going on that
Right.
those don't necessarily get texted back and forth. So, yes, obviously violence with both youth and adults is a huge issue in Salem. It's a small town that has many larger town type problems. So I think people think that the gang sort of thing's only going on in Camden or Philadelphia. It's not necessarily true. It is happening here in Salem.
Right.
Food scarcity is another major issue, unfortunately. The grocery store that was just outside of town closed a number of years ago. The city council and other people have tried to attract other major chains to come in, but economically they don't see it as being viable.
Right.
So that's a big issue. And then just gainful employment nearby is another major issue. So a lot of people travel over 20 miles, if not 50 miles, to go to work every day.
Right.
There's not public transportation to get people to those places. So just like a minor instance of something, Pure Land is a major employer in the area.
Right.
They're about 20 miles away. There isn't really a viable bus that'll take you from Salem to Pure Land and back.
Right.
So people have to pay someone to drive them to go get a job for $22 an hour, and you can see how you're kind of, doing that math. Is it worth it to go and do something like that? So
Right.
that's an issue. And I think there's definitely, I think, a bit of a brain drain. So a lot of people that want to do something, they leave Salem and don't come back. We don't really keep the people here that would stay invested in the community. That's just a few of the issues I would see here in Salem.
Issues. Okay. So where do you see the future of Stand Up for Salem?
I think the future of Stand for Salem, we've done some larger redevelopment projects like I talked about with the J.C. Penney building. We've done Salem Senior Village, which is a retirement community that's on the end of Broadway here in downtown Salem. And we've done a Finlaw office building and a parking garage. I mean, it's great that we've done those projects, but unfortunately I think that gets you a little bit distracted from doing programming and actually getting involved in the life of the residents. I would like to see us be a little more youth-oriented in what we're doing. It was the John B. Campbell Center, the Salem Fitness Center, closed down a number of years ago, unfortunately. And a lot of people feel that since that community center has closed down, the incidents of youth violence and other things have spiked in the town. So
Right.
we'd like to be able to do more with that group. I think we can do that in part with the Restoration Arts Training Center and providing either at-risk youth or other people viable training and some skills things in there.
Well, I know they're bringing the kids in. They're bringing, they had some middle school kids in like last week, a couple weeks ago.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that part of that too is, and I kind of believe in this, you don't necessarily, I don't feel like someone should have to go to college to be able to make a comfortable living and support their family. So if you give them a path where they could learn a trade, either start their own business or work for somebody else, make a good living, I think that providing that window to show the kids that I think would be really, really valuable. So I think youth programming would be great. There is definitely some historic preservation needs in town still. I think that as opposed to us carrying out those projects, maybe we would fund those projects and find some partners to do that.
Or train the partners, which
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
trying to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so the idea with that J.C. Penney building would be, if we find buildings, you can almost use those historic buildings like lab space for the schools that are going on there, and they can go in and restore these properties.
Right.
Those are just a few of the projects. We have a full neighborhood plan that's, because you have to come up with these in order to get funding.
Right.
That addresses a number of things we're hoping to look at, but those are the two of the bigger ones.
So at the same time, you're training people who now can move on to a career, but at the same time, they're fixing an infrastructure of Salem. And once that infrastructure is improved, then we have activities for kids and improving the town as a whole.
Exactly.
Right.
And actually that helps us with another issue we have in town, which is that not many people actually own the properties that they live in. So increasing home ownership, all the studies show that people care more about the neighborhoods they live in when they own their properties as opposed to renting them.
Absolutely.
So ideally, we could fix up properties, get residents to own and occupy these properties, then maybe become a little more invested in the town itself.
Fantastic. Tom Smith, thank you very much. I appreciate you spending the time with us. Stand Up for Salem has a couple of activities coming up. They have the Adult Carpentry, a 6-week course that begins November 5th, and that runs from 1 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They also have an adult ornament decorating that will be at 5:30 on November 15th. And Small Business Saturday begins in Fenwick Plaza, right behind me, on November 30th. I'm Dean Johnson, Editor-in-Chief of Follow South Jersey for Follow Salem Podcast. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.